The afternoon sun filtered gently through the tall glass windows of the Harmonia Conservatory, casting golden rays over the polished hardwood floor. It was the sort of place that seemed to hum with expectation, with ambition, with legacy. Everything inside the building gleamed with affluence, from the crystal chandeliers overhead to the marble busts of long-dead composers that lined the hallway walls. This was not merely a shul, it was a shrine to musical prestige, a sanctum where only the most privileged young artists honed their talents beneath the tutelage of Europe's finest. Inside studio, a group of students sat in hushed arrogance, postures perfect, dressed in sleek black and navy, silk scarves and Rolex watches peeking from beneath cuffs. These were children of diplomats, of concert legends, of media moguls, and foreign ministers. Each one came armed with a resume of childhood symphonies and private tutors flown in from Vienna. They didn't come here to learn how to play. They came to sharpen what the world already told them was genius. And that was the air in the room, sharp, cold, exclusive. Until she walked in. Her name was Lena Duval. No makeup, no bodyguards, no designer bags hanging from her shoulder. She wore faded jeans and a windbreaker that had seen one too many winters. Her shoes were worn at the soles, frayed where the fabric met the rubber. She held the hand of a young girl or daughter, Ava, who looked no more than 12, in a school uniform and wide, curious eyes. The teacher at the head of the room barely glanced at them, waving them toward the rear bench with the kind of distracted politeness reserved for visitors who'd wandered into the wrong room. Ava was there for a potential student visit. Lena was there just to watch. The class was mid-session when they entered. A wiry teenager with manicured nails was finishing a rendition of Rachmaninoff's Etudes tableaus on the Steinway Grand. A few of the students clapped half-heartedly. Professor Matteo Rinaldi, the Italian-born head of the piano department, smiled and offered praise with carefully chosen restraint. He was a tall man in his 60s with flowing gray hair and a thin, precise mouth. His standards were legend, his criticisms sharper than broken glass. Rumor had it he'd once dismissed a student mid-recital for an emotional inconsistency in their phrasing. When the student sat down, Rinaldi turned to the back of the room and noticed Lena for the first time. "Ah, you're here for the tour?" he said, gesturing toward her vaguely. "We sometimes allow visitors to try the piano. Would you like to give it a try? It's more difficult than it looks, you know." The room tittered. The other students looked over their shoulders, amused. A few raised eyebrows. Lena hesitated. Her eyes dropped to Ava's. The girl looked up at her, unsure, clutching her hand tightly. Something flickered across Lena's face, an emotion too complex to name. A ghost of a memory, maybe, of stages, of concert halls lit like cathedrals, of nights wrapped in Tchaikovsky and dreams painted in the notes of Chopin. Those were lifetimes ago, before the silence, before the grief. Lena took a deep breath. "Sure," she said simply, and stepped toward the grand piano. The students leaned in, exchanging smirks. Some whispered under their breath. One boy muttered something about this being better than intermission popcorn. They all expected an awkward, amateur attempt, maybe a chopped-up nursery tune played with 2 fingers. Professor Rinaldi, always eager for a bit of entertainment cloaked in humility, nodded toward the piano. "Why don't you try Liszt? La Campanella, perhaps." The room stirred. La Campanella was not a beginner's piece. It was a beast-fast, intricate, unforgiving. It challenged not just the fingers, but the soul. Lena looked at the keys. She hadn't touched a piano in over 10 years. Her hands trembled not from nerves, but from awakening. She sat down slowly. No sheet music, no warm-up, just her and the instrument. The room fell into a heavy hush. Then she began to play. At first, the notes were tentative, like a whisper of memory returning. But within seconds, they found their voice. Her fingers, Dan said no, flew across the keys with elegance and precision that silenced every breath in the room. The playful trills, the lightning-fast runs, the delicate, dynamic shifts each phrase emerged not just flawlessly, but full of aching beauty. Gone was the mother in worn shoes. Gone was the quiet observer. In her place stood an artist who played not from memory, but from the marrow of her being. Professor Rinaldi froze, the edges of his smirk collapsing into astonishment. He removed his glasses, blinked, and leaned forward in disbelief. The students watched spellbound. Some sat with their mouths parted slightly, as though caught mid-breath. One girl clutched her notebook to her chest, eyes wide and wet. This wasn't just performancy, it was transcendence. Lena didn't merely interpret the music. She became it. She struck the final chord and let it linger in the air. The sound floated, shimmered, and faded into silence. No one moved. No one spoke. And then, as if jolted awake, the room erupted not in cheers, but in reverent applause. A thunderous, overwhelmed reaction, driven not by excitement, but awe. Rinaldi stood slowly, still unsure of what he'd just witnessed. He approached the piano, his voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? Lena looked up. Just Ava's mother, she said quietly. And once a pianist. Where did you study? He asked. She hesitated for the briefest second, then replied, Juilliard. Gasps rippled across the room. One student pulled out her phone, typing furiously. Within moments, she looked up with wide eyes. Wait, Lena Duval? The Lena Duval? You disappeared after your world tour. Lena smiled faintly. I didn't disappear. I chose a different life. Word spread like wildfire. The mystery woman at the piano was no mystery at all. She had once been hailed as the next great voice in classical performance, performing to sold-out halls in Paris, Berlin, and New York. Her final concert had ended with a standing ovation, so long it made the newspapers. And then nothing. Rumors had swirled burnout, family illness, disillusionment with fame. The truth was far simpler. A personal tragedy, the death of her husband, had pulled her away from the limelight. She had chosen to raise her daughter quietly, away from the cameras and the constant demand for brilliance. Music had become something she shared with Ava at bedtime, not with the world. But now, the world had come knocking again. In the days that followed, the conservatory was abuzz. Invitations poured in for interviews, masterclasses, guest performances. International orchestras called. Talent agencies offered contracts. A famous conductor sent a handwritten letter. The dean of the conservatory personally requested her to join as a visiting artist. But Lena declined most offers. She had lived that life. She no longer needed the spotlight. Professor Rinaldi approached her again, this time not with pride, but humility. I was wrong, he said, about you, about what talent looks like. I'd be honored if you'd consider mentoring her at least part-time. Lena nodded. On one condition. Anything, he said. You stop choosing students based on where they come from, she said. Accept them for who they are, for what they bring. There are children out there with hands like mine who can't afford your tuition or your tuxedos. Let them in. Rinaldi paused, and then, slowly, he nodded. That day ended not with applause, but a soft and almost sacred quiet. The kind of silence that meant something had changed not just for one woman, but for everyone in the room. Because sometimes greatness doesn't announce itself. It waits quietly, hidden in plain sight. Lena went home with Ava, their hands intertwined. Why didn't you ever tell me you were famous? Ava asked as they walked past the school gates. Lena looked down and smiled. Because fame wasn't the best thing I ever did. What was? You, she said. And the two of them disappeared into the late afternoon, the echo of La Campanella still lingering in the air behind them.